Good evening. This is Terrie. I'm Terrie here in Denver with the Awesomism Book Club session number 5. And tonight we're going to wrap up this series with finishing up with chapters 9 and 10. And I have Karilyn Gomez here from California. Karilyn, you want to say hi?
Hi, I'm delighted to be here again and bringing it up to the grand finale for this round.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So Karilyn and I will finish it up tonight. The chapter 9, we'll just jump right into it. The title of that chapter is Next Steps, and then the title for chapter 10 is Vision for the Future. So both of these are great final chapters, and in chapter 9, Susie gives kind of a rundown on places you can go, like internet sites, that type thing, that you can access to get more information or to help you move further on your own. And some of those sites you can check out. I'm sure there's a lot out there since the book was written. But Karilyn, did you had something kind of specific in chapter 9 you wanted to mention? Is that correct?
Well, I did, but before we get there, what I was one of the things when you were talking about going around to different sites, certainly the internet is a great resource. But I think Susie made the point, and I think it's a valid one, that it's a lot of exploration. It's like she's laid out a lot of things in the previous chapters of different ways to approach this awesomism, and it really is up to parents, caregivers, when we're working with the children, to take that next step of doing a lot of exploring on their own and seeing what feels right to them, so that it's not, like she said, it's not like a 10-step program. But in doing that exploration, I think it's really valuable to pay attention to notice what feels right to you and what doesn't. Because it certainly builds on that, the trust in feeling your way through, just as the kids do, feeling your way through life, rather than this person says this is the way to do it. And it may have worked for the other person, it may work for their children, but not necessarily for your own, or it may. So I think it's really, what she was saying, it's so valuable to be like your own expert, because you know your children better than anybody else, since you're with them 24/7. So I think that, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, yeah, in these two chapters, more than anything, kind of by the time I got to these chapters, you really realize it's a book. Yes, it's about autism and awesomism, but it's really about your own individual journey to become more present, to find out who you are. So all those internet websites and suggestions are not only really geared toward how to treat your child if the child's on the autism spectrum, but really your own journey, anyone's own journey within, to find out more who they are and becoming more of that in today's world. So,
which is so important, with working with the children, and she so emphasizes it doesn't matter what you do with them so much as how you are with them. And part of what you were referring to when you asked me that question was her statement about parents having the responsibility of being the bridge to that, being the bridge for a high vibration, honing that skill, holding that vibration that does take us into the realm of being. And so we are so conditioned not to do that. It's such a culture of doing. Your to-do list. And I even heard it with someone who does meditation, that it wasn't necessarily a time of being quiet and being still. It was something that she did. This is something I do. So even in what we have called our quiet times, the time of being and being in the moment, we're not necessarily conditioned to know what that is. And that's where it's our responsibility, whether we're parents or not, I think it's our responsibility to recognize that we have the opportunity and the responsibility to let go of that doing, step into being, which automatically brings up a vibration that connects us more fully with the children and allows the children to connect more fully with being present in a body.
Yes, and she also, the point I really like is when she mentions really let just pay attention to the child, pay attention to children that you're around, and really become aware of the ways you're being led by them.
Yeah.
So that they are one more avenue. It's like there are many ways to become present, many ways to become like what you're saying, Karilyn. But the kids are one major way because they really can lead us if we pay attention and watch for when, if we follow their lead, when that really does work. It's just a brilliant way of becoming aware, on any path. And I think people that have children or have been drawn to this area, that's one of the reasons, because the kids, really teach. They don't teach it directly, but just by being what they are, they teach how to really follow the leads. So,
absolutely. And the point of excuse me, noticing what is from a just an observational place with no judgment allows not only being comfortable with them, but being comfortable with yourself. So vital, because if you can't be comfortable with yourself, you can't be comfortable with anyone else. If you don't nurture yourself, if you don't pay attention to your own needs, then you can't do that with your children as much as you'd like to.
Yes, and she mentions, the great thing about it is she mentions the difference between a quote child that is not on the spectrum versus one that is, and she says how other children, yes, they're in the moment, but they can be, you can do things to them so that they can kind of compromise and be modify their behavior, and they'll kind of go with it after a while. Maybe not a 2-year-old, most other kids beyond the 2-year-old phase, but then she just mentions with these kids on the spectrum, they will not, they cannot be, their behavior will not be modified because they will not give in to that whole realm of compromise, because they're human beings.
Absolutely. I know when I was walking the other day, I was thinking, okay, when this book was written, it was like 1 in 150. Now it's what, 1 in 50 are on the spectrum, or thereabouts. That was, what, 6 years ago?
Yes.
So what I was curious about was, okay, that number is going to keep going down. So it'll be 1 in 40. It'll be 1 in 30. At some point, there will be so many number-wise that you can't really have a diagnosis. It's like that's going to be, that will be the population.
Yeah, that's interesting because I was just looking at a video by Ron Davis. He's probably in his 50s or 60s, and he was very very, very autistic. When he was younger, and they couldn't recognize it, and he was nonverbal, and he has since had companies, and he's a brilliant man. But he said that I think this was in 2011. He went to the government and got a document where it showed the percentage increase in a 10-year period, and it was 500% increase in this category or this population. And he was just showing how in his example, throughout history, there have only been like 4 other times, like in the last 1,000 years or whatever, where there's been a change in the intelligence factor of the human species. And he said, he compared the Renaissance man and some other, like 2 or 3 other examples, but he said this is absolutely showing a change, evolutionary change in the whole way that we think and the way we are. And he said, he mentioned that there's some child that in New Zealand that he's so bright, so brilliant that they can't even measure it. There's no nothing that can even measure his. Well, this man talks a lot about IQ, but whatever IQ is, but just even body intelligence, the whole spectrum of intelligence, regarding the change in the future. So.
Well, that's why I think it's so important to have this kind of approach, this awesomism approach, because I have heard people talk about this 500% increase, but still from a perspective of it coming from toxicity in the environment, and so it's causing something that needs to be fixed, rather than looking at it as an evolutionary step. So I think it's this kind of approach that Susie has put with the awesomism is vitally important to get out there.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. And chapter 10,
of course.
chapter 9, and chapter 10, she does just talk about, does it feel like, when you approach your children or how you want to lead your life, is it what you want to do, or do you approach from the standpoint of this is what we should do, or what, the way things have been done in the past? There's just that whole mental habitual process where, or even lack of awareness, kind of unawareness, that we kind of go on autopilot, doing things going forward as how they've always been done in the past. We don't really question. So she talks about how to break away from that, or these children break you away from that because they're not going to let you, fall back.
Oh, exactly, and it's it goes back to that being able to be with yourself, and when you're with yourself and you're comfortable with yourself and can recognize what your feelings are, you do know what you want to do in that moment and are much less likely to just go through approach life through habitual old patterns, because I think you'll see the potential and the possibility of what presents in this moment, and you have practiced enough being that you'll recognize it and you'll take advantage of it, and that just builds on itself.
Yes, and it is a process. It's kind of a lifelong process, but it's great to see all the steps along the way when you really notice that you have become more. Sometimes it's hard to see when you really become more aware. It happens gradually, sometimes not so subtle, but sometimes subtle, and therefore sometimes it's good to just take. Well,
I think that's one of the beauties of children who reflect so accurately, because you get to see, if you choose to, if it's like, okay, what's possible that's happening with me that is being reflected through this behavior in my child. Yes. You look at that, you change something in yourself, and you see that behavior change. That's pretty quick feedback.
Yeah, it is.
So it's helpful. It actually is helpful. It's certainly not comfortable all the time, but I think it can move things a whole lot quicker.
Yeah, because I hear parents saying all the time that it's so amazing, because when they become aware and change, they do see that behavior change very quickly in the child. It's quite remarkable. It changes so quickly when we have all these other type therapies and such that you work on for a long time and just never get to the point. So yeah, it's really been wonderful.
Well, and that's what I think one of the differences when you're working with energy directly, and that subtle energy, or just left brain top kind of therapy. Because it just doesn't get to the meat of things the way working with energy does. That's going right to the source.
That's quickly, yes. And then she talks about how, well, and it's great because as these parents or even professionals become aware, then we really do lead the way for doctors, teachers, helping them become more aware when they interact with these children. And Susie talks about by really standing in your power or in your knowing, then that really creates the change. And doctors are more willing to change than teachers, whatever. Some of them aren't, but some of them are. If you just show them the way, or even just be it, not that you really.
It takes such courage and trust But when your child's concerned, I think a lot of times we're more ready to do that than if it
Yeah.
was just standing up for ourselves. But it certainly, um, it does take courage to do that. But what a great partnership you have with your child when you do that. And it has to bring change. And like you say, there will be doctors that won't go along with that. And I think more and more there will be, partly again, it's partly because of the numbers. They're starting to see so many more children and have more experience with it, that I think that's opening their eyes and their experience, certainly broadening their experience with children on the spectrum in different ways to handle things
Yeah,
that
I think you're
are
right.
innovative.
Yeah,
Excuse
I
me?
think people are more willing to step up when it's your child, and then once you learn to step up because it's your child, then all of a sudden you learn to step up for yourself. So they're at every level that they are assisting this whole move toward, more being who we really are and tapping into what we really need and want, and
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
create as a real great person. Um, So, let's see. So she says in the end, we really get the ability to see how these kids operate beyond time and space. And I really love this part, because that is the whole element that they really do. And that's like a whole new world. So you want to comment on that first, Karen?
Yeah, boy, literally a whole new world. When you come in high vibrational, multidimensional, um, it certainly offers a look at the world truly in a different way. But again, we have to um, be open to that, say what else is possible here, because I think what has happened so much, we've so been conditioned to this 3D world where certain things it had a linear pattern, very left brain. You could plan, you could see ahead, and these guys just blow it out of the water, because it's when you have that balance of left brain, right brain, and they come in so right brain, it's a whole shift in what is possible and what one can see, and it does go beyond time. But again, it comes back to being in the moment, because as long as we stay linear, then we don't see that, we can't experience that going beyond time. Mm. But certainly it's endless opportunities to do that.
Yeah. What amazes me is when we talk about high frequency or multidimensional, sometimes we always think of like the X-Men and all the superpowers and all these things that are, and the kids do have really amazing abilities, but what always I find amazing is that the messages often come in the very ordinary, even from the kids, like when they give a message, they might use the current day song or a TV show or like just mimic a phrase, and it seems so ordinary sometimes when that multidimensional or high frequency piece isn't always like some etheric thing that you're thinking is like, Star Wars or whatever. But so it's just that really tuning in and becoming so aware of the moment and the message that it can give, and just watching how that connects. I find that across the board, it's pretty amazing.
And I remember Susie with a story, I don't remember the details, other than the child that she was working with was telling her something, and then he told, I don't know if his teacher, and she marveled at how he could change his languaging to suit that person. And I think this is what the kids do. It's almost like, okay, I'm not going to give you something too far out, because then you're not going to see it. You're really not going to see it. But if I can make it ordinary enough for you, so it's just a little bit of a shift that's huge. It's like if you can make just that little shift, then it does open up a whole new vantage point. And then I think some of the more the more far out messages come in, seemingly.
Yeah, and
And I think you're right. I think the ordinary is, I think that's really beautiful.
yeah, and I think I remember the one you're talking about is when the child told Susie something, and then when Susie told him to tell the teacher, and when he told the teacher, he was talking in terms of Power Rangers and like a whole different.
Yes, yes, thank you.
Yeah, and that was really that I find that amazing too. But sometimes I think too, just because they're children, it comes through. That in that case, it was really like a change in frequencies, which is true. And even when they communicate non-verbally, it can be very different. You know, what you're ready to receive or where you're at. But they're that they're not adults running around. They're kids and children. So it's like they are in a very playful world also. So when they do come in at this level, so I think that too adds that piece to it because it really is always playful. It doesn't get laden with a lot of serious analytical type, like.
Well, I mean, it comes from such innocence and such purity and such a love vibration that, talk about open heart. They are the epitome of open heart. So things can be heard in a different way, in a deeper way, and a really simplified way.
Yeah, in a simplified way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very, very quickly, very easily.
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely. Well, the last point of chapter 10 that we could maybe point out. This one is you hear many times on a spiritual path how when the student is ready, the teacher is, and Susie uses that analogy with the children. She said these kids really are our teachers, and thinking in terms of your child as being your teacher. And I think that's true of all children, and these children in particular. And the very fact that here for that evolutionary change means quantum leap in
absolutely.
Your relationship. So yeah, that's a good way to think of them. Sure. Do you have anything else?
Well, it's like it all circles back to noticing what we notice with them, being observant, being willing to learn, being willing to go beyond the linear, just being willing to be open to what they have to offer. And I think they are the supreme teachers.
Yeah, and it's exciting because that whole evolutionary change and the 500% increase, that just shows it's not going away. It will be here. They will continue to be here, and they're not going to give up on us. I mean, it's
thank goodness.
It's really a matter of just stepping into it.
And I love the partnership because it's not, they're not our little gurus. They have something to it. It is an exchange. So it's really a beautiful partnership that we have opted to be here for and be part of, and hugely exciting. Hugely exciting.
Yeah, very, very much so. Very exciting to be working with them. That's all I have for this evening, and we're going to wrap it up. So thank you for being with us for this series, chapters 1 through 10. And I'll say goodnight from here. And Karilyn, you want to go goodbye?
And good night from California, and read the book.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you.